Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Common Sense with Dr. Ben Carson. I'm your host, Ben Carson. And today we have a great guest, Payton Mayes. He's the CEO of JPI, a national real estate developer, builder, investment manager, and more than all of those things, he's a man of faith. And we're going to hear some great things about his story today. Welcome, Payton. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carson. It's a privilege.
So maybe we can just start at the beginning. And can you tell us something about yourself, where you grew up?
Absolutely, yes. So I grew up in a little town, little ranch, about 15 miles from a town called Coleman, Texas. Coleman is kind of in the middle of Texas. About 45 minutes south of Abilene, 2.5 hours west of DFW Airport.
And lots of siblings, or were you an only child?
Sure, yeah. So I had, growing up, I had one brother who's 15 months younger than me, Matthew's his name. And, we grew up in a little, again, small ranch, about 100 acres. My dad was a school teacher, and he taught agriculture science. And my mom, she was a secretary, worked for an insurance company. And so, just a little insurance agency in town. And so, grew up, that's all I knew when I was a kid. Growing up in a little town, I thought that's the way everybody, grew up. And we didn't travel much as a family. We, showed, in stock shows. And so we showed cattle and, mostly cattle, but, sheep and pigs and stuff. And so our vacations every year were going to Fort Worth and Dallas and, San Antonio and Houston to the big stock shows. And so that's kind of how I grew up as a kid.
Did you ever go to one of those cattle runs on the streets of Fort Worth?
In the stockyards to see I have seen the Longhorn in the stockyards. I've never been to where they let the bulls out and everybody runs for life. So I have not done that, but yeah, that was my childhood growing up.
Well, that would not seem to be a childhood that would lead someone to college. How did you decide on that?
Sure, yeah. So. From a young age, I always did well in school. I enjoyed school. I liked school. When I was the summer before my freshman year of high school, I remember I was on the ranch. I was doing something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I rode home on my four-wheeler, and my parents were fighting. And I never really I try not to use absolutes because they're rarely true, but I do not recall my parents fighting that much before, and I didn't really know what was going on. Well, come to find out, my mom had been seeing someone else, and my dad had I think she had told my dad, or he had found out about it. And my dad he'd struggled with alcohol his whole life, and so that was a pivotal moment because they ended up splitting, and my mom moved to town, which is about 15 miles away. And my brother and myself ended up staying with my dad. And we would see my mom every now and then, but we basically, live with my dad. And my dad already struggled with alcohol. And that made it, a lot worse because, his wife leaves him for another guy, et cetera. And so in high school, again, I try not to use absolutes, but we had very little supervision. My brother and I kind of, we did a lot of things on our own. Made a ton of poor choices, but the one huge blessing is that I always did really well in school, and I think when that happened, subconsciously I said, hey, I want to do well and get out of here. I don't think I ever consciously said that, but subconsciously I just said I want to do well. And growing up, on a small farm ranch, work was something that was instilled in me from a young age, and I like to work, and so. I graduated with 56 people from Coleman, and I graduated top of the class. which, yeah, I tell people, my kids go to school with 750 students. And so graduating top of class in Coleman is different than where they go to school. But anyway, I was really blessed, and A&M I wanted to go to Texas A&M. I always, for whatever reason, as a kid, wanted to go to A&M, and went down there and started school thinking I wanted to be a doctor. And I think the reason why I said that was because, well, doctors make a lot of money. That's why I want to be a doctor. And, certainly the wrong motivations. But for whatever reason, I got down there and I said, you know what? I think I maybe want to pivot to business. And so get down to A&M and end up graduating in 3 years. I had, I tell people I did not take advantage of the numerous opportunities that A&M has to get involved in the leadership. I mean, there's some amazing opportunities. I could kick myself now because when I got down there, I think Satan was, kind of filling my head with, man, all these people, their parents are married, they have nice cars and all this stuff. They're better than you. Clearly I know now that's not the case, but I tended to hang out with people that I already had a relationship with and did not take advantage of the numerous opportunities A&M had to get involved. And so,
but somehow you ended up okay, didn't you?
But somehow God had a plan. So
you ended up in New York City after that, right?
Yes, sir. I ended up staying to get my graduate degree because I graduated early and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I had a lot of scholarship money that was kind of use it or lose it. And I convinced the business school to let me in. And they did. And I had a statistics professor, Dr. Balachetti, that I worked for him. He was the, statistics professor in the MBA program. And Dr. Shetty said, Payton, you should go work on Wall Street. And I remember saying, New York City, I'm not going up there. I mean, I grew up on a little ranch. What I knew was going to the stock shows. And I mean, I knew that there was, a bigger world out there. But I think at that point, the furthest north I'd ever been in my life was Branson, Missouri, with my grandmother when I was in 8th grade. So, I just had no idea what that world was about, but ended up going to New York. A&M has this program called Aggies on Wall Street where they send like 20 students up every summer for a few weeks to kind of understand what is this? And I did that, and it was it changed my life because I went up there and I said, this is interesting. I want to try to do this. And I don't have necessarily a great, family, life to come back to. And I want to say, from the get go is that I love my family. I love my mom. I love my dad. We've all made, poor decisions. And, I think God's used, some of the decisions they made to really impact me in positive ways. And so
you were in New York on 9/11, weren't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I remember very well the day that, I lived in Midtown and took the subway down to the World Financial Center, which was right across from the World Trade Center. And, beautiful day. And remember it, very, very well. I didn't, even though I was across the street and, it was terrible, I didn't really, I guess, such in shock. I didn't realize how big of a deal it was until I got home to my apartment. And started watching it on TV, and it's just, I remember that day very well.
Yeah. I'm sure it had a profound effect on everybody at that time.
Yes.
But, you were not married yet at that time. How did you meet your wife?
Sure. Yeah. So, was not married. I was always really shy, around girls. I always had, really high expectations. I was very picky, but I was shy, which is not a good, that's not a good combination. And so it was January 2nd of 2004. And my brother, Matthew, who, as I said, 15 months younger than I am, Matthew was getting married, and, love Matthew, good guy, but Matthew and I live, very different lives and just, took different paths. And, I think weddings are a great place to meet people. But there's no way I'll meet anyone at Matthew's wedding. Again, just because we hang out with different people. I say God had different plans. I get down to Abilene, where Matthew was getting married, and I see this girl, and she's really attractive. And I ask her. I had liquid courage in me. I said, I don't drink. I quit drinking a little over 10 years ago. We can get into that, but at that time I was drinking. And again, I was shy, so I had some liquid courage in me. And, I asked her two questions. Number one is, does she want to dance? And then the second question is, when are we going to get married? And so that was a little over 20 years ago. And yeah, Andrea, she's been a huge influence in my life. And she's the one that actually, introduced me to who Jesus actually was.
We were in New York, and then he subsequently got married, and now we're going to find out how he wound up back in Texas.
Yeah. So, just kind of, part of that. So, Andrew and I started dating. Met her 6 weeks. 6 weeks after we met, we had our first real date. And she was telling me some of the things that, kind of happened in her childhood. Her parents were also divorced when she was entering high school. And, but she found out that she had, these half siblings that she didn't know about. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. How'd you get through that? And she said, well, a relationship with Jesus and, community at church and everything. She said, Payton, where do you stand? And I get kind of uncomfortable. And I say, well, I believe in God, but I don't understand all that stuff. And she said, well, that's important to me. And I said, well, you're really good looking. So if it's important to you, it's important to me. And, I had a friend that, in New York that I'd, known, and I knew he went to this church, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go try this church. And it was, called Journey, in New York, and went to it. And it was an amazing experience. It was great worship music. The teaching was amazing, very practical from the Bible that I actually could understand. But before that, I probably went to church twice a year with my grandmother growing up. And, I didn't really have any idea what the pastor was saying. So that was the start of the journey, again, early 2004, when Andrea encouraged me to really find out who Jesus was. And, we started doing our relationship wrong from the get-go, even though I knew who Jesus was and know what I'm not supposed to do. We made a lot of poor choices. And in the end of 2005, we broke up because I just felt God saying something's not right in your relationship. And, I made a really poor choice to have a one night thing with this other lady. Again, very, very poor choice. But God used that to convince me to, hey, maybe you care about more Andrea about more than you think. And so we started talking again, and this was the last weekend of January of 2006. I fly back to Texas, and again, she's in Texas, I'm in New York, and we decide, where's this relationship going? Well, she had shared that she had also seen someone else, and it's like, man, well, I think all indications are we should go our separate ways, because your parents were divorced because of an affair, my parents were divorced because of an affair, and it just seems like we should go our separate ways. I said, but I still care about you. I'm not sure what to do. And she said, well, we need to get a Christian counselor. And so we first saw his Christian counselor, Dr. Richard Clark, in February 1st of 2006. And we still see him every week. We'll see him tonight, actually. So it's been 18 years, pretty much on a weekly basis, and just can't tell you how grateful I am for his influence on our life of, again, just speaking truth. And I highly encourage folks that even if you don't have a crisis, we had a crisis at that time, but I feel like Andrew and I have a great marriage, but we want to have a better marriage. We want to be better parents, etc. So he's been just a huge influence in our lives.
I always say when two people get married, it's like taking two pieces of sandpaper and sticking them together. There's a lot of friction. But if you keep rubbing them together, pretty soon they get smooth.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I love that. That's a good that's a good analogy. Anyway, Dr. Clark had we kind of told him what we were doing, and he said, well, a couple of recommendations. Probably the most important one is that I highly encourage you to quit having sex. He said, number one, it's not biblical, and number two, it clouds your judgment. Y'all are trying to figure out where this relationship's going. You can't even think straight when you have that going on. And said, well, he asked, will y'all commit to abstaining? And we said, yeah, sure. We'll do that. We're committed. Well, I tell people we were committed till we weren't. And, it was Andrew's really attractive. and anyway, I remember it was the last week of March of '06. She calls me. I'm in New York working, and she tells me she's pregnant, and that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I tell people from the outside, I think people would say, "Oh, he's got the perfect life. He grew up in the middle of nowhere, and now he's working on Wall Street, and he's traveling the world, and he's making good money, and all this stuff, and his life's going much better than planned." And this was definitely not planned. And I hate to say it, but I told Andrea at the time, I said, "Man, I think you should consider having an abortion." And thank God she said, "No, I'm not doing that." We had Dr. Clark to walk us through there. And again, looking back on that, I was like, oh man, how selfish I was, et cetera. But Merritt, our son, was born November 9th of '06. And then Andrea and I ended up getting married the summer of '07. And then we had, we had two more girls now, Channing and Stella. But it's a long answer to your question, how do we get back to Texas? So in September of '08, I was at Merrill Lynch, and that's when a lot of folks will remember when Lehman Brothers filed bankruptcy, and Bank of America acquired Merrill Lynch. At the time I'd been in New York almost 10 years, and I never thought I'd be up there that long. And Andrea was, she was a young mom, number one. And number two, she was doing a lot of it on her own, because I love to work. I, would leave the house at 6 a.m, get home at midnight, or I'd be traveling, a lot. And I just, was not a good husband and father. And we had a great church in New Jersey, but we were going every Sunday, but we weren't plugged into the community. And so that's, a big lesson learned. Again, I encourage folks is, number one, get involved in a church, and then actually get involved, get plugged in. And we weren't. And so Andrea, she wanted to move back, and I thought that would be, that was good. I thought, what little money I have, or we have, will go further in Texas than New York. And we ended up moving back to Texas in August of '09. But we moved back, and I commuted back and forth for almost 3 years.
Boy, that was tough.
It was, yeah.
But then you started building up a business in Texas. How did that come about?
Yes, sir. So when we had at the time of the great financial crisis, was working in a group at Merrill Lynch that basically invested the firm's capital into real estate related opportunities. So it was a very broad mandate. We were doing debt and equity and kind of all asset types globally, both assets and operating companies. So it was an amazing experience for a young kid that grew up in middle of nowhere in Texas, to learn a lot, make a lot of mistakes, but just really get a lot of great experience. And so when Bank of America acquired Merrill, the private equity business, they didn't really want to be in. And so the firm retained myself and a small team to basically wind that business down. And then in 2012, beginning of 2012, my partner Molly and I partnered with Blackstone to acquire that portfolio, to kind of take it off of the books of Bank of America Merrill Lynch. And so we were in this, helping them monetize this portfolio of assets that was about $4 billion in real estate in 19 different joint ventures, 8 different countries, 3 different continents. So it was a hodgepodge of stuff. And but again, great learning experience. At the end of that, when that was winding down, we had built a house, and the person that ended up, I remember it was January 2nd, 15. You probably know Mike Murray, because I know you're on the board of D.R. Horton.
Yes, I know.
Mike had, he and his wife Karen were driving by, and I was out in the front yard, and they were driving slow, and I just asked, "Hey, can I help you?" or something like that. Struck up a conversation, and Mike and Karen ended up buying that lot. So I developed a relationship with Mike, and Mike recruited me over to D.R. Horton, and so. I remember telling Mike, I said, "I don't know anything about, building houses." He said, "You don't have to. We got people that know how to do that. But you have a background that we think could be helpful here." So that was in May of 17 is when I ended up going over to D.R. Horton.
Wow. I didn't realize that you had spent time at D.R. Horton.
Yes. I wouldn't take for that time, because, it was just an amazing experience to, DR, started that company, whatever, 78, I believe. And just,
right.
I mean, from taking it from one house, how God has blessed him and blessed that company, from taking it to one house to now, 90,000 houses a year.
Amazing.
is truly fascinating. And, I really enjoyed my time there. When I was there, I actually ended up meeting the leaders at JPI, when one of the mandates that they wanted me to help with is help expand the multifamily development space. And so I remember telling them, I said, I'm not a multifamily developer, but, I know how to, ask decent questions. And so I was meeting people in the space and met the founders of JPI and really fell in love with the biblical foundation that they, set with the company is to, and there was something different. And so, ended up, one thing led to another and ended up coming to JPI in summer of 2019.
And when did you kind of come to the realization that your approach to life needed to incorporate God more?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like I say, I've always believed in God, but I looked at my little valedictorian speech that I wrote, when I was 18 years old, I guess. And, I mentioned being thankful to God, but I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. Mm-hmm. And, I met Andrea in 2004. She introduced me to the concept of, okay, this is who Jesus is. And I was going to church faithfully, really enjoying it and, trying to live the right way. But it was on an airplane on December 2nd of 2011. I'll never forget it. I was in Brazil. Their overnight flights coming back to the U.S. and it was middle of the night, and I like to work, and I was working, and like, okay, but I need to try to get some sleep because the flight lands here in 3 or 4 hours, and I need to try to get some sleep because I got a full day tomorrow. And I remember laying my chair back to go to sleep, and I hear this really loud banging sound, and I look around, and everyone else is sound asleep, and I'm like, man, what is that noise? And I see this beverage cart that's in front of me. And I'm like, well, maybe that beverage cart's hitting something. And so I asked the flight attendant, I said, ma'am, can you please, adjust that beverage cart? Is that what's making that noise? And she said, well, I don't hear anything. And I mean, to me, it was obvious. And I tell people, that I think that was God, hit me over the head, said, Payton, quit chasing the money. It's never going to make you happy. Trust me and follow me, and I'll take care of everything else. And so that was a huge, kind of before that moment, after that moment. And so, I went home and, kind of told Andrea, and, she said, who are you? she said she'd been praying for something like this. And again, I think we were going to church every Sunday, and we were, trying to do things the right way. But again, I think before that moment, it was more about me. Right. And I still struggle with that. I still like nice things. I still struggle with, I think pride's the thing I struggle with the most, and knowing that, I need to surrender to him because I'm nothing, without Jesus. But that was a pivotal moment.
You were named the most admired CEO by Dallas Business Journal. Now that's an incredible honor. There are a lot of CEOs in Dallas. How did that make you feel?
Well, I think, to be fair, I think I was one of the most. I think there were 10 or 15 of us or something like that. So I don't know if I was the most. But I was one of the most, and still it was a great honor. It makes me, I think, folks at JPI they'll be the first to tell you is I'm not an expert in what we do. But I know how to ask, decent questions. I think my number one job is to, attract and grow and retain the best talent in the industry. And I think that, I do a fairly good job of that. And, to me, being, a leader, is all about just, being vulnerable, being open-minded, listening. But when it's time to make the tough decision, be willing to do that. And so, I've still got a lot to learn. There's a lot of leaders I look up to and try to emulate. But it's very humbling. Yeah, there's a lot of folks in Dallas the leaders, and it's very humbling to be on that list.
How does your faith affect your leadership style?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just, I try to, again, do what Jesus does, lead like Jesus. And, I think he was very humble, and, kind. But, stern when he needed to be. And I'd like to say that, I'm try to do that every day. I'd say one of the most difficult, I still struggle with letting people go. It's something that, I have a heart for people, and but it's when that person is, in the wrong role, and it's, I've come to accept that it's not a good place for them, because they're in a role that they're just not being successful in. Maybe they're getting a paycheck that's just not good for them long term. It's obviously not good for the company. So I'm getting better at that. But that's still probably the biggest struggle that I have.
Yeah, I've never been particularly good at that either. I always find somebody else to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the housing market is going through some difficult times right now. We've got inflation and interest rates going up. What are you seeing in the near future?
Sure. I mean, man, the near future is, I'd say it's, a lot of people say, oh, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but I think, really we're always in a world of uncertainty. God knows what's going to happen, but I think to say that we know what's going to happen in the next, 3 to 6 months, I think is, I certainly don't. I think when people say that they do, I kind of question them. So the near term, I'd say it is uncertain. I think longer term, we're very, very bullish, just, about housing in, general. There's an undersupply of housing in places that need housing. And more importantly, there's undersupply of affordable housing. There's a lot of people will say, well, there's not an undersupply of housing in America. It's just there's a lot of houses that are in the wrong place. And so, we're very bullish about the industry. People need a place to live in, and especially on the affordable side. I mean, when you have the policemen and firefighters and teachers and service providers in these communities that are having to drive, hour and a half, whatever, and into work, and maybe service a little, higher income community. I mean, that's something that we want to change, because it's good for, the policemen and firefighters, et cetera, to live in the communities that they operate in. And so
it seems like AI is affecting every industry. Do you see any role for AI, perhaps in the building or multifamily or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've started, implementing into our business, and to, understand, better, building codes. This AI will summarize, how from a different platform, how does zoning work in this city versus another? It will go into public meetings and, kind of summarize what happened, what concerns does, maybe a particular neighbor group have on this product type, so we can address those. And I mean, you could do that the old fashioned way before, but just took a tremendous amount of time. And this is, just much, much faster. So, and I think we're just scratching the surface as far as, how it will actually, change our industry.
There's a lot of young people out there who are discouraged, thinking maybe the American dream doesn't exist anymore. And they just don't feel confident about life in America. You've been very successful. Life has its ups and downs. I realize that. But what advice would you give to a young person who's feeling kind of discouraged about the future in America?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think that, when I look back on my life, in the beginning, it was more, I thought, well, it's all about me. And, I think as time has gone on, I've realized that the more I focus on others, the more fulfilling and success and et cetera that I have. So not necessarily worry about, okay, what do I have to do to get a promotion or, do X, Y, Z. Is like, hey, if I focus on others and serve others, then, usually, good things happen. And again, it's not about me. I know that not all folks that are out there are believers. I assume, there's everybody that listens to this podcast is not a believer. But for me, I like to tell people is, I think, without Jesus, I'm nothing. And I think that, when I look back at my life and, kind of my story and just the little situations that, if that hadn't have happened, if my wife was not in a class in college with my sister-in-law, then I wouldn't have been hurt. I mean, all this stuff, I wouldn't have bought that lot. I mean, there's just so many things that I think recognizing God's hand in our story and knowing that it's not all up to us. And when, things don't always go our way, but I think how we react to things that don't go our way, I think says a lot. And I think you want to work with people that are positive and optimistic, that are not always, Debbie Downers. And so I think, if, tell young people is be open-minded too. I think a lot of folks, have, hey, this is what I want to do. And if it doesn't match up, in this fair way, then it's not for me. And I think, it's good to have goals and plans, but sometimes God has something that may not be in that, but it's what his will is for you. And I think, someone once told me, don't disregard something without knowing what it is. Again, I think being open-minded to how you can serve others is, I think that's the ultimate key.
Well, that certainly has been a formula that has worked for me too, recognizing where the source of real power is. We're kind of like little bear cubs. As long as we stick next to Mama Bear, we're going to be okay. It doesn't mean we're not going to have trouble, but she'll show us how to get there. And you wander far away, and that's when all kinds of things start happening that aren't so good. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us and for living an exemplary life. And may God continue to richly bless you and the whole JPI family.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carson. I'm very, very honored, and it's a privilege. And just, say, about discouraging about our country, I just get so encouraged when I listen to you, and there is hope here. And I'm so honored to be here. So thank you so much.
Talking to Payton Mayes, who's had quite an interesting life and ends up as one of the most admired CEOs in a big city like Dallas, Texas, coming from a small farm, going to the Big Apple, having various relational issues, but finally finding that by putting Christ in the center of the relationship, you could smooth out the waters. Something that I've found to be very true in my life as well. And I hope that each of you will take time and think about the role of faith in our lives. Our country was founded on faith traditions. Our founding document says that our rights come from our Creator, aka God. Think about that. Think about the fact that our faith tells us to love our neighbor, not to cancel our neighbor if we don't agree with them. We have choices. We can choose to be nice and respectful of each other, or we can choose the ways that we see on television, people being insulting and mean to other people. Thank you all for being with us once again. Make sure to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts from. That way you can make sure that you don't miss any episodes. Make sure you rate us, review us. We like those 5-star ratings. Things are expanding very nicely, largely because of you. And remember the cornerstones: faith, liberty, community, and life. We will see you next week.